sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment. Be in a state of bewilderment. That's what I mean by being spiritual. One of the ways to test whether you're on the path that I'm speaking about, the path of being into a spiritual being, having a human experience rather than the other way around, is to detect in yourself how much of my energy and my time do I spend being in a state of cheerfulness. How cheerful am I? Or how morose am I? How down am I? How, when I'm coming home to my family and to those that I love, how am I anticipating what it's going to be like when I go into the house? Am I down more? Am I unhappy more? Am I looking at the pessimistic side of life? Am I always feeling that something might be wrong? Am I putting my attention on what I don't want? Because if your thoughts are on what you don't want, and what you think about is what expands, what you don't want is what you'll continue to see showing up in your life. You'll keep purchasing it. Another element of what we call spiritual in these three words in this program is the sense or the extent to which you feel connected to other people. You see, the ego is the part of us that believes that we're separate from each other. I'm separate from you, you're separate from me. You have a different body than I do. I'm separate from what I would like to attract into my life, and I am separate from God. When you move into a spiritual approach to life, you begin to see yourself as connected to everyone and everything. And competition is replaced by something called cooperation. And when you see another human being in pain or struggling, you know that a part of you is in pain and struggling. And you begin to reach out rather than looking within and saying, how does this affect just me? It's almost as if you have to make a shift. And there's a wonderful story, and I'd like to share this story with you. It's a story, this is a story that took place at the Special Olympics in Seattle. And it's a true story. And when I read it, it really grabbed me. And I thought, when I do this program, I would like to share this with the rest of the world. A few years ago, at the Seattle Special Olympics, 9 contestants, all physically or mentally disabled, assembled at the starting line for the 100-yard dash. At the gun, they all started out, not exactly in a dash, but with a relish to run the race, to finish, and to win. All that is except one little boy who stumbled on the asphalt and tumbled over a couple of times, and he began to cry. The other 8 heard the little boy crying. They slowed down and looked back. Then they all turned around and went back, and every single one of them. And one little girl with Down syndrome bent down and kissed him and said, "This will make it better." Then all 9 linked arms and walked together to the finish line. Everyone in the stadium stood, and the cheering went on for several minutes. Isn't that a beautiful story? It's the kind of thing that I refer to when I use this word spiritual. A sense of an awareness that it isn't about being better than somebody else. I think true nobility is not about being better than anyone else. It's about being better than you used to be. And I know this about myself, that if any one of you watching this show, or any of you here in this audience were giving this talk, I could be sitting in that audience, and I would have just as much to learn from what you had to say to me as you have to learn from what I may be saying to you. The thing that I know for certain today is that I'm just better than I used to be. As a man, as a father, as a writer, as a speaker, I know that I'm better than I used to be. And I try to make that something that I do each and every day. Just a little bit better than I used to be. To me, that's what I mean when I use the concept of spirituality. There's a wonderful woman that I have come to respect a great deal and know. Her name is Carolyn Meese. And she has a tape that I heard a few years ago called Why People Don't Heal, I believe it is. I was so taken by the profound wisdom of what and how she presented it that I called and left a message with her that if she would like my endorsement, if she's interested in that, I'd be happy to give it. And she did. And what she said is that the reason that people don't heal in their life is because they are bonded to the wounds of their past. They not only have understood them and practiced them and perhaps even embraced them and understood them, but they have now bonded to them. And they use these wounds as a rationale for why their life isn't working the way they would like it to work today. And they continually haul out all of these terrible things that happened. And within 5 minutes of meeting them, you'll know that they're an alcoholic, or that they were sexually abused, or that their father walked out on them, or that they lived in an orphanage, or that they were very poor, or that they suffer from depression, or whatever it might be. And the constant using of these wounds of the past as almost like a calling card is what keeps them back there. I'm not saying that you have to give up everything and everyone that ever happened to you, and you have to forget about it and not have traditions. I'm suggesting that you take this very, very seriously, that the reason why your life is going the way it is going is because of the choices that you are making today, right now in your life. And that anything else that you are using that is back here in the wake as a rationale or an explanation for why your life isn't going the way you would like it to go is nothing more than an excuse to which you will bond yourself, and as a result of that bonding, you will keep yourself back, living in those obstacles, rather than creating an intention of what you want to have for yourself in your life. And it's a very common thing to do. And on the extra mile, you'll find people. I remember Castaneda's teacher telling him, you'll know when you are free from your personal history, because he said, look, if you don't have a story, you don't have to live up to it, which is pretty good. You just don't have to live up to your story. He said the way that you will know that you are free from this is that you should check yourself into the seediest motel that you can possibly find, with cockroaches in it, and with the paint that is, chipped off the walls, and the most unpleasant kind of place that you can check yourself into, and don't tell anyone that you're there. And you stay in that room and don't come out until it makes no difference to anyone whether you do or you don't. How's that for a test? Until you get free from this idea of what somebody else might think or what might say or might begin to use on you. And most of this stuff that is in our past is all related to our families. My mother, my father, my siblings, my in-laws, whatever. And I've suggested that you look at all of the things that you have allowed in your past to be the reasons why, particularly in your relationships with your family, and just say to yourself, I no longer have a personal history. I am not attached to any of that at all. I look upon my personal history, and I have for a long time, as one of the great advantages of my life. Because I feel that when we come here, we have a heroic mission, and that it was my dharma, my destiny, my path, if you will, to teach self-reliance. I've never done anything else since I was a little boy. And my entire professional life and all of my teaching and all of the work that I've done, have all been directed towards just teaching people about self-reliance. And it's almost as if God said, if you really want to teach self-reliance, then you'll have to get your little ass into an orphanage and spend a few years there learning to rely upon yourself. And once you learn how to do that, once you have that experience of how to do that, then you'll never use it as an excuse or a rationale or a reason why you can't get something done yourself. You don't have to blame anybody else. You'll know to rely upon yourself, and it won't be because of something that you learned in a book or that you heard on a tape. It'll be because you have made conscious contact with self-reliance. And you had to have it, and you had to do it. And the people that I have had the greatest amount of respect and admiration for over the years are the people who have been through it, understood it, written about it, or told other people about it, and let it go, and moved on in their life. Martin Luther King Jr. once had remarked that the only way to convert an enemy to a friend is through love, not hatred or fighting. We don't conquer anything, and there's nothing to fight. Consider the results we've achieved when we tried to fight something in order to conquer it. For example, ever since war was declared on poverty, there's more of it in the world than ever. Our wars on drugs have only served to triple our prison populations and bring illegal substances to more people at younger ages. As early as junior high school, there's hardly a child who doesn't know how to acquire all manner of drugs. Our wars on crime have resulted in more criminals, more fear, more surveillance, more distrust, and more abuse by law enforcement personnel. Our war on terror has turned us into people who behave toward those we label terrorists in ways that emulate the terrorism we're supposedly desirous of eliminating. And our wars on cancer, obesity, and hunger have not eliminated those conditions either. Here's the reasoning behind what I've just elaborated. The truth of this universe is that we live in an energy system that operates on the law of attraction. That is, we become what we think about all day long. If we think about what we hate, this is an energy that we're offering to our desires. In this system, then, we'll attract more of what we think about. Consequently, more of what we hate is what we will attract. We act on our thoughts. Our thoughts of hate, violence, fighting, and war generate actions of hate, violence, fighting, and war. And lo and behold, we see the fruits of this thinking showing up even if our intentions are positively aligned with good energy or God energy. We get what we think about, whether we want it or not. Thoughts that translate into fighting and war almost always guarantee that the response is a counterforce. That is, others will respond in kind to our desire to fight and conquer. This kind of counterforce can continue for centuries, with unborn generations programmed to carry on the fight. This same understanding of how fighting weakens us and generates more imbalance in our lives is applicable to our experience with addictions. We can become addiction-free relatively quickly if we make a decision to eliminate fighting and conquering from our efforts. The thoughts and energy that replace fighting need to be in the form of non-warlike thoughts. As Emerson said so succinctly, the remedy of all blunders, the cure of blindness, the cure of crime, is love. And addictions constitute one huge blunder. I can assure you, having spent a great deal of my life immersed in such folly myself. Overcoming blunder-filled thinking. For those of you who may not be familiar with my friend Ram Dass, in the late 1960s, he helped shape the awakening consciousness of an entire generation with his bestseller, Be Here Now. One of my favorite Ram Dass stories is the one he tells about an early encounter with Neem Karoli Baba, his guru in India. Ram Dass brought some capsules with him to India that were designed to dramatically alter one's state of consciousness. Neem Karoli Baba confronted Ram Dass about these pills and asked him to give all of them to him. Ram Dass thought that he'd brought a long-term supply of this very powerful psychedelic substance, yet he watched in horror and amazement as this enlightened being swallowed all of them right before his eyes with no visible reaction. His guru then asked him if he had any more, since these obviously weren't working. After telling this story, Ram Dass concluded with one of his most sagacious observations. "If you're already in Detroit," he said, "then you don't have to take a bus to get there." Addictions of every description are vehicles that people board in order to get someplace higher, more pleasurable, more peaceful, more tuned in and turned on, and so on. But if you're already aligned with this energy, then it's obviously unnecessary to climb aboard any vehicle headed to a place where you currently reside. I've played with addictions and addictive behaviors for a large part of my life. In fact, I'd say that these various addictions have been among my greatest teachers, allowing me to see that there's a higher level of consciousness and blissful awareness available to us all. But I'm also aware that using substances of non-well-being in order to experience this separate reality is assuredly a counterfeit means of doing so. I'm essentially addiction-free, and I want you to know that I didn't get to this place by fighting my addictive nature. In fact, the more I tried to conquer addictions at various stages of my life to things such as sugar, soda pop, caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, and certain drugs, the more they'd gain a foothold on me. Force, counterforce. I'd apply my weapons, and they'd bring out their artillery, with my body as the battleground where the war was being waged. I was blundering my way into deeper addiction. Earlier, I quoted Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, "The remedy for all blunders is love."